As much as I've tried to keep it a secret, I like music a lot. And the even more shocking and world-shattering secret is that I also like stuff besides music, some of which I'd like to eventually make entire videos on. But for now, an idea came to me during one of the many instances of me writing words on paper and then absent-mindedly drawing circles below them. I looked at this and thought, oh, I could make a video about pieces of media that are about music. And most of the ones I really like turned out to be anime or manga, so okay, it's another Weeb episode. But really, this is a category that I know I have actively seeked out at multiple points, wanting a story that's about the start of a band or music fandom or whatever. But I found there was also a category that I'm picky about. I guess whenever you're watching something about a deep interest of yours, you're gonna be more critical than you'd be with other stuff. But especially with music, which is so incredibly subjective, when the way it's being used doesn't hit right, it can fully take you out of that moment. Like an easy common example is when a character is hearing a particular song for the first time, and you can see that it's so perfect that it moves them instantly, their pupils dilate, they feel like they're floating, and their life is almost certainly changed forever. And then you hear the song, and it's like, oh, it's just the Shins. Plus the way songwriting is often portrayed as this instant and effortless thing is annoying, and there are probably even smaller, abstract, nitpicky layers to be annoying about. I don't know. Not all the reasons have to make sense, but, there are actually a good chunk of works that nail its subject one way or another. So, yeah, I guess that's it. I'm just going to ramble about some of them. What was once the obvious go-to with this category, and still remains among the first clear recommendations, is Beck, Mongolian Chop Squad. Initially a coming-of-age story and tale of musical discovery for a quietly decent kid named Koyuki, it soon turns into the story of the new rock band Beck. Also known as Mongolian Chop Squad outside of Japan, because the musician Beck already exists, plus Jeff Beck, so... Look, I don't know why the author did that, but whatever, as they aim to make themselves known to Japan and to the entire world. And the first strength to the series is that it gets across how that road is long, it's difficult, it's unfair, and it's unpredictable. Expressed well even just to the point where the anime ends, which is only around a third of the total story. Like in one series I won't be diving into, Carole and Tuesday, by the 6th episode, their second overall gig is filling in for a huge act on the main stage to play their own songs at a crowded music festival. Come on. And I mean, the gig doesn't work out. The story at least has enough sense to not have that be where they're launched into stardom. But still, come on. You wouldn't even be sniffing that stage that quickly. And Beck understands that. Almost every inch they move forward is earned by Beck themselves. Because the band is also never presented as having this newfound, earth-shattering sound that nobody else has, and everyone who hears it is amazed by, so it's just a matter of them getting heard by more people. At most, it expresses Koyuki's vocals as being particularly attention-getting, but Koyuki's voice does not carry Beck as a band. They're ultimately just a rock band like so many others, and they can have bad shows. Multiple times in the story, people are walking away from a concert thinking, man, Beck sucks. Even some of their eventual biggest supporters weren't sold right from the first beat. Whenever these guys wanted to make an impact of any kind, they had to be functioning at their absolute best. So pound for pound, you'd be hard-pressed to find another series that deals with as many different aspects of what it takes to be a band. Everything from first learning your instrument, to forming a group of musicians, to practicing constantly, the boring part-time jobs you have to do to stay afloat, not being confident in any of the lyrics you write, trying to find a label, trying to sell merch, dealing with record executives, becoming part of a collective scene, your first tour, your first EP, your first album, and of course just trying to manage all the dynamics between the band members, which even more specifically is probably the greatest aspect of Beck's writing. Sakuishi understands that the relationships between the 5 members of the band shouldn't all be equal so as to make it convenient he can pair off whatever members for whatever storyline whenever he wants. It's consistent and natural how Koyuki and Saku, as the clear youngest members, are the closest to each other, while Taira and Ryusuke, as the most experienced musicians, are also close and often are the ones setting up plans for the band, leaving Chiba feeling like the odd man out, especially when faced with people praising Koyuki's voice, even though Chiba is more often the lead vocalist. Saku, as the quietest one, acts as Switzerland whenever conflict arises, while Taira is the wisest and almost always an active peacekeeper in the group. Ryusuke, while presenting an aloof front, has impatience and passion that shows itself clearly when the dam breaks, often through Chiba's brash nature. And Koyuki's naivete may unintentionally worsen any issues, but his quietly good nature will have him always sincerely and clumsily searching for a solution. These main characters are so well cared for by Sakuishi, even down to something like their hairstyle or headwear changing day to day just as it would for real people. I love little touches like that. Heck, even just in the anime, the music they use does an admirable job feeling like it's coming from these guys specifically, instead of just insert rock music here. Beyond the vocals for Chiba or Koyuki being from their respective voice actors, the instrumentals show the bass as the clear standout piece of their songs, which fits so well since, even without hearing that, if I had to think which character is the most skilled musician, I would think it's Taira. He's one of, if not the most experienced, his playing is always stable, he's the backbone of the group, and he always had the most and best other offers for bands he could go play with besides Beck. Really, most of the songs made for the anime are surprisingly good. Like Moon on the Water gets me, Brainstorm's great, the chorus of Slip Out, and the evolving cover of the Beatles' I've Got a Feeling, which I was surprised they were able to cover outright in the sub, but don't worry, in the dub they went full JoJo's localization with it.
I can't express this emotion in me.
I will say that I wish the episodes highlighted different parts of these songs, because as is, you'll be hearing this many times. But I can actually recommend the soundtrack. It's not going to be on your topsters or anything, but it's a solid listen. The songs by Beck themselves and most of the ones by other bands filling out the musical setting of the show. Now, if we're talking exclusively about the manga, blanket statement is it's worth reading. There's so much more to the story and the character writing remains strong. But I do have to say, I don't love his art style. I think it should be more stylized or a bit more cartoony rather than the semi-realistic thing. Sometimes faces are just ugly. The anime did a much better job softening and distinguishing those designs, but I just think it isn't ideal for the manga when his perspective and framing for panels is often so flat. So many panels will have characters either looking straight at you or with a side profile. These very basic perspectives his designs don't mesh with, since the semi-realistic art style only truly works, I feel, in these large, page-consuming drawings that offer more creative angles and the space to breathe it in, usually during band performances. So I think he at least needed more flexibility in how he draws people in each of these different circumstances. Also, a big story device from near the end of the anime is reused a bit too specifically later in the story. I don't like that he seems to think the Western music business is super hardcore and gritty with constant gun violence, martial arts, and mysterious murders led by this guy and his lackey who I think is supposed to be Snoop Dogg. Just a bit much and not one of the recurring storylines that I ever looked forward to coming back around to. And most of all, I don't like how he draws characters looking back and forth really quickly. It just looks like they have two heads. Shouldn't you make one or both of the heads be a little more faded to show the motion blur further? I don't know. I don't like any of that, but I love Beck. That core of its main characters is just so rock solid. Also often including Ryusuke's sister, Maho, and her romance with Koyuki, something that, beyond a few nitpicks of common jealousy tropes, was quite well done, especially for a series that, like, romance isn't one of its first three genre tags, you know? It appropriately shows the two as clumsy and indirect, even with Maho coming off as quite extroverted and daring. But we're not always there for every single beat of their story and hearing every thought they have of each other. Sometimes instead just leaving a moment be. The part that we do see is what effect the differences between them have beyond their attraction to each other and their specific interactions. Like they have cultural clashes with Koyuki being from Japan while Maho spent most of her life in America, and stuff like his more timid nature leaving him feeling isolated from Maho's more boisterous friend group, and thus feeling more distance from her every time he's in that position. Just very real aspects to a relationship that not many series get to, and that's pretty cool. All of the relationships at the center of the story are well grounded like that, and make it easy to take Beck warts and all. And for as great as Beck is for the countless sides of its subject that it tackles, Ongaku, Our Sound, is a film I love even more for how simply it presents that same topic. Its world has a Mike Judge-esque, yup, yeah, type of tone with this kind of nowhere setting and these nothing lives, where these three slackers decide to form a band just because. They play with two basses because they didn't know the difference between that and a guitar, and not even an entire drum set because you can only be bothered to carry around so much. They aren't preoccupied with sounding a particular way, being particularly proficient, or reaching a specific goal, and they're happy with that. There's this great little moment where one of them is talking to a girl about how they're in a band now, and they're gonna go practice. So she tells him good luck, and after a very long silence, he replies with, which, in addition to just being weird and funny, I take to mean him thinking, what do you mean? We're already doing exactly what we want to do. What would luck be needed for when we have... And like, hell yeah, it'd be better if we could all have that mindset for anything we choose to do. It deals with the appreciation of playing and hearing music in both a meaningful and uncomplicated way. Like something as simple as this can legitimately connect with another person, matched well by its charming and slightly amateurish animation, having not a huge budget and largely being worked on by one guy with the aid of rotoscope, which is often a polarizing method. I've certainly not loved several instances of rotoscoping that I've seen, but I think it's buried enough in Iwasawa's art style that it works here. The whole combination gives off a sort of DIY vibe that again meshes with its story, and I especially like that the only points where the animation evolves from that and becomes more lively and intense is when characters are actively experiencing music in some way, and it looks genuinely great in those moments, while still retaining the film's core, not fully polished aesthetic. It's also just a really funny movie. It uses the plain, deadpan personalities really well for punchlines, whether they're sudden
バンド名決めろ。
バンド名か。
そういえばまだ決めてなかったな。古武術ってのはどうだ？よし、決定だ。
or preceded by a long, awkward pause as Kenji stares off into the distance, contemplating what will be a very straightforward response. It's all perfect. I don't even rewatch films that often, but after watching these 71 minutes for the first time, not even 2 days later did I watch it again, and only a few months after that, watching it a third time for this, gladly. And in that time rewatching and re-examining stuff that apply to this category, I did try to dig into 2 series that I hadn't read at all before this, the first of which being Me and the Devil's Blues, a manga that takes liberties with the stories of 1930s blues guitarist Robert Johnson, and the famous rumor that he sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads in exchange for becoming as good at the guitar as he is. It pulls you in with its tale of rock mythology and how it weaves that story with other infamous figures of the time. But what surpasses the writing is its distinct art style that will bend its perspective or even its reality while using this line shading that, especially when turned up to 11, makes the images feel chipped and scratched and aged, or with flashbacks too. While most manga portray that by having the outside of the panels be solid black, here it's just these faded black edges. It's like all the images actually came from 70 plus years ago and not from some Japanese guy drawing them in the 2000s. And the author sure knows how to make the latter clear, based on his other works like Prison School. So the style in Me and the Devil's Blues was an active choice to better fit with an old Americana tale. Its volume covers often accomplish that too, with visible brushstrokes or stray pencil lines. And the moments where it all becomes more abstract to represent the occult side of the story, I mean, they pretty much speak for themselves on how effectively chilling they are. Good stuff. And the author hasn't worked on it in about 15 years, so I guess we're never going to get the whole story, but you know what? Still worth a read. And the other one I looked at specifically for this was Blue Giant, which more than any of the countless series on rebellious and/or slacker rock bands, embraces imperfections in sound and not-so-immediate accessibility, as Dai, being a largely self-taught saxophonist for many years, is in need of instruction and guidance in some areas, but in others his inexperience opened him up to directions that others wouldn't have found and plenty of people would have rejected outright. Like there's this one point where Dai's playing solo, completely loose and however he wants in front of a whole crowd of people. And we get this 2-page spread putting a focus on the various reactions that all these people are simultaneously having to his music. And they're all across the board. Confusion, indifference, shock, amusement, annoyance, joy, he gets it all. Which both naturally makes whatever his sound is seem more interesting than everyone unanimously telling us, the reader, wow, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my piece of shit life. And is also just a more real response. Something that's new and different and strange is more often than not going to get an initially polarizing reaction, but if you have faith in it, then you improve what you can and keep pushing that sound just as Dai does on his way towards his earnest, very Shonen Jump Naruto goal of being the greatest jazz musician ever, whatever that specifically means. It's a very timeless feeling series from what I've read so far, both in terms of the story's setting, which, outside of a few pieces of technology popping up like CDs or an iPod, doesn't have many references that would date it, so you could have it take place pretty much any time from the 60s or so to now, with very few adjustments needed, again at least from what I've read. But that feeling is also in the art itself, which has a more detailed modern style within these pretty simple, square paneling with very straightforward flow that I find is more reminiscent of manga from the 70s or earlier. And Blue Giant having connections like that to the past and very little to date it overall is especially fitting given that jazz is certainly one of the most timeless genres of music there is. A very comforting read and one that I'm going to stick with. Then for more jazz, there's the series Kids on the Slope, which tells us of the relationship between Sentaro and Carole in the mid-60s, as the latter is quickly converted from a lame classical music loser to a cool jazz piano man. And while there's plenty to appreciate in its 12 episodes, from its calm, patient tone to the endearing friendships of the main cast, What stood out the most to me was how often it uses people playing music together as means for them to communicate, which is something that naturally fits more with jazz than it would with rock or pop music. Jazz can be simultaneously more loose and fluid with more erratic energy. Instruments can lock in together, or they can play as call and response, or be challenging each other in intensity. It's a neat way to use their subject-to-detail relationships. Like how starting off a song they both know how to play is used to essentially offer an olive branch and say "I'm sorry" without actually speaking. And I like how the musical chemistry between our main characters is rarely ever lessened even when they're on shaky ground. Very true to a lot of bands where they can argue day in and day out, but on stage they still match together perfectly. And one more that brings out even older sounds. The film Inu-Oh is the only one I've seen that touches a fair bit on traditional Japanese instruments, adapting part of the 14th century Tales of the Hiki, where the blind Tomona and the deformed Inu-Oh use music from the biwa and dance to connect to spirits and tell those spirit stories for all to hear. Now, while the biwa would imply a complete and definite focus on traditional sounds, the center stage performances in the film do essentially just become rock songs with some biwa flair added to it, which is a little disappointing. Like, those songs are still quite good, and you get plenty of that older sound in smaller moments or in the general score. The overall soundtrack is arguably the best of anything here. But I do think it would have been cooler if they held back a little and tried to have those main songs only contain instruments from around that time period, or at least only stray a little, and still see if you can inject into that the rebellious rock energy that they're clearly going for with these characters' roles in the setting. Plus, watching it was a step beyond the usual complaints of, the animation of that drummer did not exactly correlate to what the music actually was. Because here it's like, I hear a full drum set, I hear an electric guitar, yet I see none of that. But you know, nitpicks. The performances still have plenty else to take notice of besides that. All the staging effects, I love how Inu-Oh dances. There's just so much fun, weird ways to make him move with such a disproportionate and asymmetrical body, and the animators take full advantage of that. And the film overall does look gorgeous. Nice blend of modern styles with old Japanese designs and coloring to fit with that folk tale it's retelling. I mean, it's directed by Masaki Yuasa, who in general rarely misses, but especially with animation, he does not often go to the helm of something with a standard art style. I especially like how it illustrates Tomona seeing through sound and touch. Just the general fuzziness of the animation in those moments. Clever way to portray that. Cool movie. Bocchi the Rock. Lonerism and social anxiety is constantly clashing with the desire for self-improvement and to play in a band. Which, at its core, that's a pretty sweet story, with Bocchi dragging herself or her friends pushing her forward each step of the way towards things she wants but is terrified to do. Because not everyone has that aforementioned shonen jump, undying drive to accomplish their goals. Some of us just hope that those opportunities magically appear in front of us because making eye contact is tough, you know? And Bocchi works as a representation of that side of things because she takes mostly common or reasonable anxieties like that and exaggerates them via her voice actor, who does a great job capturing that intensely awkward and clumsy personality here. And of course the animation, or sometimes lack thereof, which always finds a different, absurd yet fitting way to illustrate Bocchi's mind, and adds an extra piece to the show's visual identity beyond its standard art style, which is very nice and appealing, but not that far outside the norm. Also worth noting that a lot of these scenes, and a lot of scenes in general, are anime original or just heavily expanded upon. The manga is a pretty simple comic strip style, capturing little moments in usually 4 to 8 panels. So I guess you could say it having a lot more empty space needed to fill out and adapting it to an anime makes it an easier fit for weirder stuff like this. But regardless, the studio deserves a ton of credit for their creativity in doing that consistently. It's very evident just how much these people cared for the series and that it wasn't just some other job for them. And the writing has that same care in how it shows the aspects of being a musician. While its story is on a small scale, like a majority of the scenes probably take place in just Bocchi's bedroom, her school, and that one venue that they work and perform at, it covers a lot of the early points of that experience, some being very obviously big for those characters, like getting out of just being a bedroom guitarist, or writing lyrics that are honest even if they seem a little embarrassing to you, but also really little things, like Bocchi not staying in time with the band well because she doesn't make eye contact while playing the song, or them all trying to look cool for an official band photo, and Nijika refusing to let them all hold their instruments for that because she'd be stuck just holding drumsticks and that would look lame. Also how booking and making money on gigs actually works in Japan. The series' focus on music in general feels even more specifically Japanese than like Beck, which shows itself more in the manga of each having parodies of albums or bands, and while Beck does so with, not entirely, but mostly English-speaking bands and artists, Bocchi's references are all Japanese bands, with particular love to Asian Kung Fu generation, given the 4 main characters' names all align with the names of that band's members. Plus the closing song to the anime is a cover of Rock and Roll Morning Light Shines on You, so they have good taste. Also, best main cast of any series here. Bocchi's an all-time great lead character. The band dynamic and the other members are well defined and they have their own gags, playing with Nijika's ambition, Yukuyo's cheerfulness, or Ryo's stoic nature, and the drunk bassist woman too. She gets it. Bocchi's a series that I was actually scared to watch because I knew I would like it so much. Do other people do that? Do you drag your feet watching something that you're pretty certain is going to be one of your favorite things ever? Because with this, I knew, obviously one day I'd finish it, and then I'd have no more Bocchi, and that'd just be terrible. And terrible it was. Facing that fact pummeled me, it destroyed me. It's the only series to bring me so low that I finally stooped to the level of wanting to buy an anime figure. Not even One Piece could do that, but Bocchi, with their stupid face, pulled it off. And whenever Bocchi comes up nowadays, it usually goes hand in hand with K-On! And I like K-On! It's fun, it's cute, its type of peaceful, meandering ADHD slice of life is endearing. But I don't view it as a music show so much as a slice of life show that happens to have some music flavoring to it. Especially now that Bocchi exists and will always act as an easy comparison of cute anime girls playing music, with the obvious difference being how much Bocchi actually involves the real aspects of what it takes to make music and be a band in Japan, whereas K-On! Has way more of the girls just messing around and maybe sometimes having fun playing instruments, which the show itself even makes fun of. And the difference is totally fine. One isn't inherently better than the other. I just don't have much to say about this side of it. Though K-On! Being an outlier in that way did get me thinking more about shows qualifying as a show about music without music actually being a part of the plot at all. Like beyond this, you could certainly at least argue for pieces where a specific musical style is so woven into the show's overall identity that it represents more than just the soundtrack. Think like Samurai Champloo's famous chill hip-hop sound combined with Edo period Japan, creating that fresh tone to an era that's well worn in Japanese film and anime. Like if the show didn't involve hip-hop, it wouldn't feel right, since the influence is neatly placed into other corners of the series, like a one-off character beatboxing, or breakdancing, or in a few episodes having cuts between scenes be represented by back-and-forth record scratches in a few different ways. Plus other tangential relations like editing referencing other pieces of analog technology or other aspects to US urban culture popping up in episodes. Stuff like that really ties the room together, you know? And it fits with the general coolness of its main characters too. Could maybe also say Cowboy Bebop with how jazz and blues connects to the series, though not as strongly as Samurai Champloo, I don't think. Fooly Cooly though is definitely another, since the Pillow's music soundtracking, it feels so intrinsically tied to the show and its moments of summery nostalgia. I mean, a key piece to Haruko's aesthetic is the bass guitar she's always swinging around, so I certainly don't think somebody being hit with music is of understated importance to the show. And maybe the sequel seasons that seem to all have titles referencing music genres would add more to that idea, but I've never seen any of them, and frankly I haven't seen evidence that anybody else has watched them either, so I guess we'll never know. And now here's a series that I would love to see get a proper localization and adaptation, but probably never will for some reason. Shiori Experience is a series where the plain school teacher Shiori essentially becomes possessed by the spirit of Jimi Hendrix and has to become a legend in the music world before she turns 28, or else she'll die. And initially that main concept did not interest me just because the ghost of Jimi Hendrix being a key character seems weird, and having him play guitar for you, that's just a cheat code. Where's the agency from our main character? But from reading it, right from the first time Hendrix actually plays guitar, he does so by plugging into the back of Shiori's neck, and they put on a performance that wows the crowd, but by the time it's over, Hendrix is already unplugged, leaving Shiori to wonder how much of that sound people were gobsmacked by came from her versus just Hendrix. So from there she tries to build up a band via a school club using her own skills, with Hendrix more so just being an advisor who still lets her make her own mistakes and only actually plays guitar through her in their free time when he wants to. Like the first time Shiori's band writes their own song, they're all hyped up on the process and proud of what they made and are encouraged by him to play it live when they're offered the chance. And when they do, nobody cared, because it was a boring song and Hendrix was well aware of that. They needed to learn the hard way that even with this guy by your side, it's not going to be that easy. And the overall handling of Hendrix is surprisingly strong as a pretty fully realized secondary lead character. He can be intense and harsh when dealing with music and often imparting his wisdom onto Shiori, but otherwise is usually lax and even jovial. And he isn't contained to just the bubble of things he experienced during his actual life and remaining static in his perspective there. Though he misses parts of his past life, he's still curious about the world, wants to continue writing his own music. And there's one chapter in particular that I like where Shiori takes him to a record shop, where he has a total blast catching up on everything that's happened since he died, both in terms of hearing new sounds and genres that were created, but also seeing how old and pruned up so many of his past contemporaries now are. It also feels perfect that, like, most people need to eat, most people need to sleep, but Jimi Hendrix needs to play the guitar. It's portrayed as a part of him that he uses as the only possible way to release this energy pent up inside of him. He was a good choice for this role. Aside from how generally iconic he is, using any sort of well-respected deceased person for a character is a fine line to walk as a writer, but Hendrix is a little easier of a fit because he burned bright both a long time ago at this point and for a pretty short amount of time. So he still feels more mythological than a lot of other musicians. I mean, not as much as Robert Johnson, but, in that way, still more malleable than, say, a Lennon or a Cobain, who does actually eventually appear, and I think you can feel the writer being a bit more careful with him initially. But even when he gets into more detail there, I think the series still pulls it off, and I have faith that should other real musicians show up as characters, Shiori Experience will continue to walk that line well with all of them. Because the series is not overly reliant on this sort of rock and roll fan service. Firstly, its art style is incredibly smooth and appealing. They can redo that shot of Shiori jumping in the air with her guitar 1,000 times and I'll never get tired of it. It uses its cartooniness to creatively illustrate what hearing or playing the music in the story is like. Its humor is nice and punchy. I especially like the gags that they do utilizing the fact that Jimmy's basically a ghost. Whether the punchline is out in front or it's just a background gag where animals or small children can seem to sense his presence. Also, its plot has already pulled off a few swerves, and each chapter is very well structured. Like, it's a monthly series, so it has more pages than most, but even more so than other ones like Beck. So many of the chapters are cohesive and have their own beginning, middle, and end, rather than just directly picking up where they left off and inserting some sort of cliffhanger when they run out of pages. They all contain little arcs, essentially feeling like if they were adapted, each chapter could be one episode. And most crucially, Shiori plus the members of the band she builds up stand on their own as characters, all being distinct and well characterized as they're each picked up in the early story one by one in a sort of shonen, Straw Hat Pirates kind of way. Actually, another point that gives some shonen vibes is this little stretch of chapters where each member is basically going through their own little training arc, but extra value is added onto that common trope by firstly having actual good insight into what methods are used to improve at a specific instrument, and more notably, with each of those chapters being dedicated to a certain character, he refuses to tell each of those mini-stories in a remotely similar way, letting each one hold its own distinct tone and style until the group comes back together and it returns to its standard easygoing pace. It's a series completely filled up with positive creative energy. It could have entirely been about these characters with no famous musicians in sight and still been extremely strong. Shiori Experience includes these faces not because it needs to, just because it wants to. Something embraced in its themes of, even in the face of real-life pressure or a legitimate musical legend standing right next to you, just playing guitar for the sake of playing guitar. Releasing your creative energy, not worrying about any experience or credentials needed to do so well, and not with a path all planned out. Doing that just because it's what you want to do. Which in a story about an artistic medium is a necessary philosophy to hold, because inevitably, for so many people, it's not going to lead to anything tangible for them. I mean, there are countless great records and great bands I know that had all the talent, but didn't find the actual success just because lightning didn't strike in the right place at the right time, I guess. That's how the world works. But of course, in this case, there's nothing to worry about because it's all a story, and obviously in a fictional story, the characters won't fail to accomplish their dreams. I'd just be oh shit, what's that? The manga Solanin by Inu-Oh Asano tackles that idea more grimly, being primarily about people wandering through their young adulthood, slowly falling into the standard role in Japanese society of salaryman or office lady that's left for anybody out there to fill. With the thing further making that occasionally inevitable life feel dead and claustrophobic, being the lingering desire for creativity and being known to the world, which could be represented by many goals, but in this series it's through musicians, as Meiko, her boyfriend Taneda, and their circle of friends from their college's light music club all in one way or another feel like they're lagging and question their own happiness amid each ordinary day in their ordinary lives. Solanin doesn't necessarily have the concrete answers to that, being unhappy with your place in the world. It puts out that your road does always and inevitably move forward, so there's no reason you can't try to change which track you're on at any point. But ultimately, even if you try your best, probably even if you make all the right decisions, you can still lose. That's just how it goes. In the whole world, in one country, even in just one city, each person is still pretty small, and there's no changing that. Indirectly emphasized further by the story often changing perspectives amongst that group of friends chapter to chapter, limiting the extent to which any of them can truly even be the main character of this one story. But I do think the story questions a common idea of what it means to be important, to make a difference, to have a purpose, contrasting these larger-than-life goals with these few tiny moments that really struck me. Someone appreciating you for having a consistent positive impact on their day-to-day life. The words you said to one guy convincing him to take a different path. Being one of the only people to remember a person after they've passed away. Like, does none of that make you important, or does it only matter when you're in the history books? Because even those will eventually fade away when the sun consumes us all. So, more than anything else, even the most ordinary places that we're more likely than not to end up in, it's best to just try and find a way to enjoy being alive, doing what you want to do as much as you can, even if it's not quite as often as you'd like, or in the exact way you'd like. You can form your own happiness within that, and you can make it work. That's about the most optimistic it gets. Only being hung up on the greater possibilities it could lead to and somehow lasting beyond your own life might just be spending a lifetime saying goodbye. To twist a line from a key song in the story that Asano worked on with the Asian Kung Fu generation to make a reality. One that sounds very affecting. It's just a really good song, whether it's the version that closes their album Magic Disc or the one performed in the film adaptation. Like, how do these guys do it? They're just too good. Every closing song should be by them. I mean, Solanin as a series is good too. Like, really good. If Beck is one side of the coin, then Solanin is the other, representing better than any other series, not just ones about music, but in general, the times when you're wandering, when your drive is shaky, if pointed in any specific direction at all, and you just don't know. And for as much praise as Asano's other big series, Goodnight Poon Poon gets, I'd be very surprised if whenever I read it, it manages to surpass Solanin. But Asian Kung Fu generation, though, they're on another level. They're like really, 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 really good. It's crazy. How do they keep doing it? They should just never stop because they're just really, 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 really good. Like, they really should close everything, like I said. I mean, I even tried to have them end the Japanese music video, but then it got copyright claims, so I had to take it out and put in, I don't even know if I put in any song. If I could put in a different Asian Kung Fu generation song, I should have done that. I mean, is there an Asian Kung Fu generation song playing now? That would be really good. But I don't know if copyright, so many issues with that. Oh, they're just so good. Like, all their albums. Oh, I really think Ichichi is like probably my favorite drummer ever. They're just like an amazing band, and they still put out so much music. It's crazy how active they are. Like, how do these guys do it? They're just too good. Like, there's a reason they're used for OPs, but the melancholy songs work really well. Probably even better. It's so emotionally affecting. I think part of it might be that because I don't understand the lyrics. It's just pure music getting across emotion. That might be why it works well, but it's still, they're all just so good. Like, how do they do it? Okay, post-credits scene. So pretty much all of the pieces of music-related media that I liked that weren't anime or manga were movies that I only had like one or two things to say about each, so they wouldn't work well blended into this or in their own video, so instead I'm just going to run through some at the end here. Swing Girls is a movie that's fun because at least for a good chunk of it, all the characters are terrible at their instruments, but they're having fun and want to keep playing anyways, and I wish more things embrace that idea of just sucking at music. We Are the Best is one of the only other ones I know that I think has a good chunk of that. School of Rock. Perfect movie, no explanation needed. Sing Street is done by this one director who has made several music-related films, all of which are at least fine, but none are spectacular. This one is overall a totally solid coming-of-age, romance, young rock band film. But the one detail that I thought it nailed is how when you're really young and still figuring out your taste, a new discovery that really clicks can completely consume you for a while. Like in this, he hears Duran Duran, and then that influence is very clear in the first song he then writes. Then later, much more extremely, he hears The Cure for the first time, and it's immediately like, whoa, this is it. I need to write a Cure song now. We gotta look like them, we gotta sound like them, everything, and so on. A very particular point that's often true to life, I feel. High Fidelity. Cool movie. I love Jack Black as a snobby record store guy. Wild Rose. Cool movie. Has a right outlaw country spirit to it. Whiplash. Cool movie. I still rewatch the ending once in a while. Love and Mercy. An actually good biopic about an important musical figure with an actually unique structure where rather than just going through Brian Wilson's entire life and spotlighting those points where he sat at a piano and these amazing songs apparently came to him out of thin air, it focuses and jumps between his time producing Pet Sounds and Smile, tirelessly working to perfect these increasingly ambitious projects, and then his later years being manipulated and abused by Eugene Landy. Both Paul Dano and John Cusack give great performances, 2 thumbs up. Linda, Linda, Linda. Really just a nice film about friendship with a good homage to the Blue Hearts and the greatest, most awkward love confession scene in history.
사랑해요.
아, はい。歌の練習あるから。
Leto, or summer I think is what it translates to. Mostly interesting from a historical perspective, as it's about this period in Russia in the 80s where rock music was allowed, but only under very strict supervision. Like, I will say the musical sections have cool directing and artistic effects, but outside of that, what stuck out the most to me as someone who didn't know details of Russia's relationship with rock was seeing stuff like the concerts being so tame, the audience had to stay seated and quiet, couldn't even do something like hold up a sign for the band to see. People had to smuggle in rock records from the West in order to hear any of Bowie or the Velvet Underground or whatever. And it's based around the start of this band called Kino that seems to be one of the most important rock bands in Russia. I had heard a few of their songs before, but they hadn't meshed with me. But the very last scene of this movie, when they play the song that's name translates to tree, that one clicked with me and opened the door a bit to them.
Я посадил дерево, я посадил дерево, я посадил дерево, я посадил дерево.
And yeah, maybe there's some I'm forgetting, but that's all I got. This is a real ending. You can leave the theater now. Goodbye.